The first thing people notice is not the size of the house. It is not the ironwork or the color of the walls or the shape of the windows. It is the pressure inside it, a strange, quiet pressure that seems to gather in the air and rest against the skin. The rooms do not feel empty, they feel occupied by waiting. Even in daylight, with doors open and voices moving from one floor to another, the silence inside has weight. It sits behind every sound. A shoe on wood, a hand on a rail, a breath held for no clear reason. People enter speaking normally. Then, without planning to, they begin to lower their voices. Some stop talking at all. There are houses that feel old in a comforting way. They carry age like a blanket. This house carries age like a stain. The walls seem to keep things instead of releasing them. A person may stand in the front hall and feel a sudden wish to turn back. Not panic, not shock, just a calm and rising need to leave before anything begins. That is what makes it hard to explain. Nothing obvious happens. No crash, no visible danger. Only the feeling that the house has already noticed you, and that being noticed was a mistake. The stairway does not help. It rises with dignity, but there is something severe in that rise. People look up and imagine someone standing there, not because they see a figure, but because the space asks for one. The upper floors are worse. The light changes as if it has passed through water. Corners appear deeper than they should be. Hallways narrow the longer you watch them. Visitors who are not nervous anywhere else become careful with their steps. They begin to look over a shoulder that was calm outside. They pause before entering a room, then laugh at themselves, then pause again. The body understands what the mind does not want to say. Some people feel it before they even cross the door. They stop on the pavement and look up. The house stands with the confidence of something built to be admired, yet many do not admire it for long. Their eyes move away. Locals pass by with ordinary faces and ordinary errands, but many of them do not look directly at the windows. Some quicken their pace, some cross the street without thinking. A few do look, but only briefly, as if long attention might invite something private and unwelcome into the day. No one agrees on what is wrong there, they only agree that the wrongness is real. Inside, the quiet has layers. The front rooms can feel formal and still. Then, one step farther, the mood changes. A back room may seem colder, though the air itself is unchanged. A landing may feel watched, though no eyes are present. The house does not frighten people all at once. It wears them down in small ways. Someone laughs too loudly. Someone forgets why they entered a room. Someone reaches for a companion without noticing the movement. It is never dramatic. It is always human. That is why it lingers. People leave carrying not a story, but a feeling, and feelings are harder to set down. At times, the place seems almost embarrassed by attention. It does not put on a show. It does not give itself away quickly. Instead, it lets ordinary details do the work. A chair placed just slightly wrong. A door left open where memory insists it was closed. A patch of silence so complete that the next small sound feels personal. There are houses that feel like history. This one feels like memory, but not your memory, as if you have stepped into the shape of someone else's distress and are expected, somehow, to stand there and understand it. Only later does the setting begin to matter. Only later do people step back and realize where they are standing. This is not some lonely farmhouse far from roads and neighbors. This is in the heart of a city known for old beauty, shaded squares, brick walks, wrought iron, and trees that seem to hold whole centuries in their branches. This is Savannah, Georgia, a city that often looks gentle at first glance. But gentleness can hide pressure too. The old streets do not erase what was lived on them, they preserve it. And now and then, preservation becomes its own form of unease. The house itself has a name that many people know before they ever see it: the Sorrel-Weed House. Even spoken aloud, the name sounds divided, as if two stories were pressed together and never fully settled. It stands near Madison Square, with the calm face of wealth and order. In photographs, it can look grand. From the street, it can look proud. But those who enter often speak less about grandeur than about atmosphere. They remember the strange slowness of time inside. They remember how the rooms seemed to listen. They remember the effort it took to remain rational while feeling with increasing certainty that rational thought was not the strongest force in the building. There are stories told about such places, and the stories often come too quickly. People want causes. They want a clean line from event to emotion. But the house resists that. Long before a visitor learns any names or dates, the feeling has already arrived. That is what makes the place so unsettling. Knowledge comes after the reaction. The body answers first. Shoulders tighten, speech softens. The eyes begin to search spaces they would ignore anywhere else. Even those who come ready to dismiss the reputation can find themselves hurrying through certain rooms and lingering at the door before stepping back into the street. And once outside, the relief is never complete. The square opens, the air moves again. Carriages pass, branches stir above the sidewalks. Savannah goes on with its usual grace, yet something remains attached to the mind. People glance back. They tell themselves the feeling will fade by the next corner. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes the house follows them in a quieter way. In the hotel room later that night, in the mirror while brushing teeth, in the sudden decision to leave a lamp on. They do not always say they were frightened. They say something else. They say the place felt wrong. They say it felt heavy. They say it felt like a house where something terrible had once been understood in silence, and where that silence was never broken.
The Sorrel-Weed House did not begin as a place of fear. It began as a statement. Construction started in the 1830s, and the house was completed in 1840 from the plans of architect Charles B. Kluski. It was built for Francis Sorrel, a wealthy Savannah shipping merchant, and it stood as a fine example of Greek Revival design, touched by Mediterranean influence. In a city already filled with strong houses and strong ambitions, this one announced status, confidence, and permanence. It faced the square as if it expected to be remembered. In that, at least, it was correct. Francis Sorrel had risen high in Savannah society. The house he built was large, formal, and built to host. It later became known as a place where important guests were received, including Robert E. Lee, who visited the home in late 1861 and early 1862. The Sorrel family's son, G. Moxley Sorrel, grew up there and later became one of the Confederacy's youngest brigadier generals. To the outside world, the house represented order, rank, and a family firmly planted in the city's social life. That image matters because what disturbed people later was not ruin, it was contrast. Such impressive houses are not supposed to feel unstable. Then came the event that still hangs over the house more than a century later. Francis Sorrel's wife, Matilda, died in 1860. Modern retellings often cover her death in dramatic language, but what matters most is the human reaction around it. A death inside a prominent family's home, especially one tied to self-destruction, changes the way a building is seen. It alters how servants move through halls. It changes how neighbors speak the family name. It makes every room part of an afterthought. Even where records are thin and rumor has grown, the fact of Matilda's death remains one of the central fractures in the history of the house. It is easy now to rush toward legend, but that would miss the real damage. In houses like this, grief did not arrive alone. It arrived with embarrassment, gossip, religious concern, household tension, and the practical burden of continuing daily life in rooms that had been marked by a violent end. People still had to cook, clean, write letters, receive callers, and keep up appearances. That kind of strain does something lasting. A family can survive loss, a household can continue after scandal, but the feeling inside the structure changes. A grand home becomes a place where each ordinary sound carries a second meaning. Records also show that the house changed hands soon after. Henry D. Weed purchased it in 1859 and took possession in 1862, and the residence remained in the Weed family until 1914. To many outsiders, that looks like a normal transfer of property during difficult years. But for a house already touched by personal tragedy and national conflict, the change would not have felt simple from within. New ownership does not erase old grief. It only places fresh routines over older distress. The furniture shifts, the voices change, yet the rooms remain exactly where they were when the worst things happened. Savannah itself was also changing. The Civil War cast pressure over the city. Families watched the future narrow. Young men left. News came in broken pieces. A house near Madison Square, however grand, could not seal itself against that atmosphere. Imagine what it meant to live there then. Heavy curtains against the heat, letters opened with shaking fingers, hooves in the street, a mother listening for a step that did not come. Even if one ignored every later tale attached to the building, those years alone were enough to leave deep marks on the people who slept under that roof. There are smaller stories that never entered formal records but fit the pattern of old households under strain. A seamstress called to mend mourning clothes and refusing to return after dusk. A young delivery boy leaving a package at the door because he did not want to cross the threshold again. A doctor who stayed longer than expected after Matilda's death, not from medical need, but because the servants did not want to be alone upstairs. Such details cannot be proved in every case, but they are believable because they are human. Houses earn reputations through repeated ordinary fear long before they earn fame. By the 20th century, the house had already become something more than a residence. It sat with memory packed into it. It was first opened to the public in 1940 by the Society for the Preservation of Savannah Landmarks, the group that later became the historic Savannah Foundation. In 1954, it became one of the two first homes in Georgia to be designated a state landmark. A.J. Cohen Sr. bought the property in 1941, and the Cohen family lived there for more than 50 years, with a clothing business later operating on the site. These facts are often presented as proof of survival, and they are, but they are also proof that the house never returned to simple domestic life. It became a place observed, explained, restored, and still never fully settled. That is part of what makes the house so disturbing. Not one death, not one rumor, not one century. It's the steady layering of public admiration over private distress. The Sorrel-Weed House stood through generations of pride, grief, war, commerce, preservation, and curiosity. Each era gave it a new purpose. None gave it peace. People kept entering with new expectations and leaving with the same uneasy pause. They did not always agree on what the house meant, but they agreed that it did not feel neutral. A building can be beautiful and still make people uncomfortable. A building can be important and still feel wrong. In Savannah, where many old homes carry stories, this one has remained different because the reaction to it has remained strangely consistent. Even when history is told in careful dates and proper names, what survives underneath is not ceremony. It is the image of people trying to go on in a house where going on never seemed fully possible.
Over time, the stories changed names but not shape. That is what people in Savannah noticed. Decade after decade, the details shifted, yet the feeling remained nearly the same. A person alone in the house too long will begin to listen instead of think. A worker sent upstairs would come down irritated, then quiet. Someone locking up at night would check the same door twice, then a third time, not because the lock failed, but because being certain inside that house was harder than being uncertain. Repetition gave the building its power. It did not need spectacle. It only needed consistency. Neighbors developed habits around it. Some of those habits were simple and practical. Curtains were drawn on the side of the street that faced the upper windows. Children were told not to play too close to the rear of the property. Delivery men preferred daylight. Cab drivers dropped visitors off, but often did not wait with the engine idling near the curb for long. People who had no interest in old stories still absorbed the local rhythm. You could tell who knew the house well by how little they said when passing it. The silence around it had become a kind of neighborhood custom. In the late 19th century, older residents reportedly warned new arrivals in indirect ways. They did not tell them dramatic tales. They said things like, "Do not rent a room there if you value sleep. Do not take watch duty alone if you are the nervous type. Do not stand too long on the back stair after midnight." Advice like that sounds foolish when repeated in daylight, but in old districts where homes are close and memory travels through families, such warnings carry more weight than formal history. They tell you how people behave when they think something is wrong and do not want to sound irrational. By the early 20th century, when the house moved between uses and identities, the pattern grew stranger. A carpenter might refuse a second contract after a week of repairs. A cleaner might insist on bringing another person into certain rooms. One story, still repeated in soft voices, concerned a temporary caretaker in the 1920s who agreed to sleep inside for extra pay while part of the property stood quiet between occupants. He lasted 4 nights. On the 5th morning, he was found sitting on the front steps before sunrise, fully dressed, with his bag packed and his key laid beside him. He did not complain. He did not ask for money owed. He only said the house made it impossible to trust his own thoughts. That phrase lasted because people understood it. Fear is bad enough when it has an object. A man hears a break-in, sees a fire, smells smoke. He knows the reason for alarm. But what the caretaker described was worse. He said he would hear nothing and still feel interrupted. He would sit in a chair and become certain that someone else had entered the room, then discover no one there. He would climb to bed and feel, with full waking clarity, that he had forgotten a person somewhere inside the house. Not a task, not an item, a person. He began searching rooms for someone he could not name. By the 4th night, he no longer believed his own memory. There is another story, darker and more painful, from the middle years of the 20th century. It concerns a woman who worked in a business operating from part of the property after the house had already passed from private grandeur into something more public. She was careful, dependable, and known for her calm nature. According to those who knew her, she began staying late to finish accounts because the daytime noise made concentration difficult. At first, she said the quiet helped. Then she began to dread the quiet. She told a friend that the building seemed to hold its breath after everyone left, and that she could never shake the feeling that she had overlooked someone still inside. One evening, she did not come home on time. Her family found her near the back of the property almost 2 hours after closing, sitting on the ground beside a service door with papers scattered around her feet. She was not injured, she was not drunk, she was not confused about who she was or where she lived, yet she could not explain why she had remained there. She kept saying that if she walked away too quickly, it would notice. She never clearly defined what it meant. She took leave from work after that and never returned to the building. Years later, she still crossed the street when passing it, even in broad afternoon light. People hear stories like these and look for a single cause: rotting wood, bad air, suggestion, family legend. Savannah has heard all of those explanations. Some may even be true in part. Old buildings create odd sounds, old reputations shape expectation, but those explanations weaken when the same reaction appears in people who do not share the same beliefs. a laborer from out of town, a clerk who laughs at rumors, a teenager sent inside as a dare, a preservation worker interested only in measurements and materials. Different kinds of people, similar endings. Restlessness, irritation, a need to leave without announcing the real reason. One of the most disturbing accounts isn't famous because it never became dramatic enough for newspapers. A restoration assistant in the 1990s was tasked with working in an upper room at dark so the space would be ready for visitors by morning. He was young, practical, and eager to impress. Around midnight, he called a supervisor from a payphone several blocks away. He had left all of his tools behind. When the supervisor reached him, the young man was standing under a street lamp, staring back in the direction of the house as if it expected it to follow him. He eventually admitted that he had climbed out through a side opening and crossed the yard instead of using the interior stairs. He said the stairs felt occupied. He knew how that sounded. He did not care. That is the sort of detail that stays in a city, not the grand claim, the small human shame. A grown man too frightened to use a staircase, a woman sitting on the ground because leaving too fast felt dangerous, a caretaker who could not stop searching empty rooms for a person who did not exist. These are not stories of courage or spectacle. They are stories of private minds bending under a shared pressure. That is why neighbors kept warning each other. That is why the house earned not only curiosity, but caution. And so the pattern settled in. People arrived thinking they were separate from earlier visitors. They believed their own time, their own reason, their own mood would protect them. Then the house would do what it always seemed to do. It would strip experience down to silence, waiting, and the unbearable sense that something inside had not finished with human fear, not because it chased people, not because it revealed itself, but because it made so many people across so many years behave as if they had heard a message delivered without sound.
Today, the Sorrel-Weed House stands in a city used to being looked at. Savannah lives with attention. Visitors come for the squares, the church spires, the soft evening light, the old homes with their careful facades. The house remains part of that landscape, preserved and visited, admired for its architecture and remembered for its past. Modern restoration helped return much of its historic form, and the property reopened to the public in 2005 after earlier preservation efforts dating back to 1940. On paper, that sounds reassuring. It suggests that time, money, and civic pride have brought the building safely into the present. But being open does not mean being easy. Locals know the difference. Many of them can speak warmly about Savannah's old beauty while growing oddly flat in tone when this house comes up. They will recommend squares, restaurants, river views, museums, and shaded streets without hesitation. Then, if the Sorrel-Weed House is mentioned, there's often a pause. Some smile, but it is the kind of smile that closes a subject rather than opens one. Some say it is worth seeing once. Some say the architecture is remarkable. Very few sound eager to spend longer there than necessary. People still change their behavior around it in small ways. Joggers on morning routes look ahead, not up. Couples taking photographs angle themselves so the house is in the background, but not too near. Workers unlocking nearby businesses at dawn sometimes avoid being the first to glance toward its upper windows. Tourists stand on the sidewalk making brave jokes, then fall quiet when the door opens. These are ordinary reactions, easy to miss if you are not looking for them. Yet together they create a pattern. The building continues to influence movement, tone, and attention before anyone says a word. Inside, modern visitors carry phones instead of calling cards. They arrive with cameras, reservation emails, online videos in mind, and the confidence that comes from living in an age that likes explanations. Still, the older reactions return. People check behind themselves in mirrors. They become protective of personal space. Some hurry through back sections and linger only where other people are gathered.
It is common to hear someone who laughed outside go silent in the middle of a room and stay silent until they reach the street again. Later, they describe not an event, but a feeling of being pressed upon from a direction they could not identify. Staff and guides, when they speak carefully, tend to describe the house less as dramatic than exhausting. Not every day, not every person, but often enough to be remembered. Certain rooms drain conversation. Certain stairways change a group's pace. People who enter as part of a crowd can still feel suddenly isolated, as if the house has separated them from the others without moving a wall. Even those focused on history or architecture sometimes report an odd impatience building inside them. They want the tour to continue. They want it to end. They want to be outside. Then, once outside, they're embarrassed by how strongly they felt it. Savannah residents who have never entered the house can still inherit its reputation through behavior. A parent glances up while driving past and tells a child to look somewhere else. A shop owner nearby locks the rear door before dark with unusual care. An employee taking trash out to an alley decides not to linger after hearing nothing at all. Rumor in a city like this is not always spread through words. It is passed through habits. The young notice what the old avoid. They ask why. Often they receive no real answer. They receive only a shrug, a changed subject, or a simple instruction not to stay there too long. At night, the house becomes harder to place in time. Street lights catch the edges, the city around it remains alive. Cars move, music carries from somewhere distant. Footsteps pass through the square. Yet the building seems set apart from those sounds, as if it receives them without joining them. People standing near it at dark often become aware of their own body in a new way. The position of the hands, the pace of breathing, the need to keep the back straight. It is not the fear of attack, it is the deeper discomfort of feeling observed by a space that offers no sign it has observed you. That may be why so many people continue to return to the same description. They do not say the house is violent. They do not say it is loud. They say it is wrong in a patient way. Wrong in a way that allows conversation, ticket sales, tours, and laughter, then waits until a person is slightly apart from the group to let the full weight of the place settle over them. Modern life has not broken that effect. If anything, the contrast makes it sharper. The brighter the phone screens, the stranger the dark wood feels. The faster the city moves, the more stubborn the quiet inside feels. And yet, the house remains part of Savannah's face to the world. It is photographed, discussed, preserved, researched, and revisited. History clings to it because history belongs there. The names are still known: Francis Sorrel, Matilda, Henry D. Weed, Moxley Sorrel. The dates remain in records. The architecture remains admired. The address remains fixed near Madison Square. The city has done what cities do with difficult places. It has folded the house into tours, maps, and memory without removing the discomfort that first made the place impossible to ignore. So, the house continues in the modern world exactly as it continued in the older one. People approach, people enter, people test themselves against the atmosphere. Some leave amused, some leave thoughtful, some leave faster than they intended, speaking too brightly until they reach the next corner. Then, the house is behind them, and Savannah opens again, with its trees and iron balconies and old stone calm. But even then, many do the same thing. They look back once, only once, as if they are checking whether the house is still where it should be. And that may be the most disturbing part of all. Not that the house has stories, many old houses do. Not that people fear it, fear can be explained. It is the stubborn fact that the Sorrel-Weed House seems able, even now, to make sensible people doubt the safety of simple things: a staircase, a hallway, a closed room, a quiet pause between footsteps. Nothing moves, nothing speaks. The city keeps breathing around it. The tours end, the door closes, the square grows still. And somewhere inside that old Savannah house, the silence remains exactly where it has always been, as if it is still waiting for the next person to notice it first.